We have a fantastic conversation with an industry legend by the name of Craig Watanabe. And if you're one of the few people who has not crossed paths with Craig, you'll be interested to know that Craig entered the securities industry in 1983, even before I was born. And I can tell you from the very many conversations I've had with Craig, he's worn multiple hats across the industry as a financial planner, branch manager, chief compliance officer, chief operating officer. And so you're going to find a lot of great insights from today's conversation. And if I could speak from personal experience, I can tell you that Craig is a true thought leader, and he's done immense work in dedicating his I guess, volunteer time in advancing the wealth management and compliance profession as a whole. It's always nice to have a good conversation with you. And I'd like to start by learning a little bit more about your diverse experience. I know you've worn, a financial planning hat. You've been a financial advisor, all the way to a chief operating and chief compliance officer hat. Maybe we can start by learning a little bit about the path you've taken in the industry.
Well, it started when I was 14 years old. So I bought my first stock when I was 14. It was Mattel, a toy company. And Mattel at the time had Barbie, which was very, very successful with the girls, and they were just coming out with G.I. Joe for boys. And I wanted to invest in Mattel, and I did, and it turned out to be a great investment. And ever since then, I had an interest in the stock market. And then right out of college, I went and got my Series 7 license and started working in the back office of a broker dealer. And I have been a financial advisor now for 40 years. And if you ask me, what is my compliance superpower? I would tell you without a doubt, it's the fact that I am a financial advisor and I understand the industry.
I love that. I know I talked about it earlier on about how you've been in the industry since 1983, and it is kind of a legendary status to know that you've kind of worn multiple hats, and the genesis of it being, just dabbling in the stock market and sort of working in the back offices and middle offices of trying to sort of figure out how that trade flows all the way down. So that is really, really unique. Now, I know firsthand how much you do for the industry, how much you do for advancing the industry and professionalizing the compliance profession, for lack of a better term. Now, speaking of which, over the past, I'd say 2 to 3 years, there's been an emerging threat of regulations. Regulation best interest being one of them, Department of Labor's PTE 2020-02 exemptions being another, possibly even the marketing rule. As someone who wears a leadership hat in the compliance department, let's just say, can you walk us through some best practices and how to embrace these, almost episodic changes of regulation? How do you go from reception to execution from end to end?
That is a great question. And I'm going to tell you what I do, but I'm going to tell you that what I do is probably not going to work best for most people. But here's what I do. And it goes down to the fundamental belief that to be at the top of your game, regardless of whether we're talking about compliance or whatever in life, success leaves clues. And one of the universal clues of success is motivation and hard work. Right? Those two things together, I call them one, motivation and hard work, but they go hand in hand. There is no substitute when staying on top of your game for being motivated and to put in the hard work. Now, with regard to new regulations, it's ironic because 2 days ago, I subscribed to the SEC email data feed. So I get emails from the SEC anytime there's rule proposals and lots of other things. But they blew up my inbox 2 days ago. There were all kinds, just probably like 20 emails that were substantive, came out from the SEC. And here's what I do. I don't like reading a synopsis, a law firm review, an article. I go right to the source. So for example, the adopting release of the SEC marketing rule, I believe was like 440 pages. I have not only read it, I've read it multiple times. And I've referred to it dozens of times. And I mentioned that the SEC blew up my inbox 2 days ago. I've got a lot of reading to do and a lot of work to do, but that's what weekends are for. So I
Yeah.
intend to actually go through and actually read those releases. And I find that I just get a much better understanding. I don't like reading the Cliff Notes reviews. I prefer to go right to the source and read the entire story. And in so doing, I find that I get a much better handle on what is being proposed or what is being finalized, and then understanding the implications of how it impacts me and my firm.
Love it, love it, love it. Those you've heard it from the master here. It's about reading the actual adopting releases and book it, as much of your as much as your weekend time as possible to catch up on those 400 plus pages. And by the way, Craig, I know exactly what you mean about kind of the email feeds that land in the inbox. I've created a specific folder for the SEC just because you need to be able to distinguish it. So as it comes in, and quite often I get a little bit of a, I got to catch up on some of those readings. So that's a really, really good tip. Now, given this sort of fast and furious adoption of new regulations, a lot of folks in the industry are relying on technology partners, such as Investorcom, to help them with this. Any tips and tricks for firms who are looking to adopt technology, embrace it? Maybe it's a brand new technology vendor on the list. How do you go about that the right way?
Yeah. So one, you mentioned a brand new vendor. I believe that in doing due diligence on your vendors, especially technology vendors, your biggest and most established vendors with the best reputation, they might not always be the best. They're probably not the cheapest, but they are typically among the safest. And so I tend to favor, vendors with a good reputation like Investorcom within the industry. Second, in terms of, trying to now work your way through the due diligence and selection process, especially for compliance technology, one thing that I think is really helpful is to understand the two things that technology does well and the one thing that technology does not do well. The two things that technology excel at are, number one, managing large amounts of information. Really, really good at managing large amounts of information. And number two, calculations and analysis. Technology really good at those two things. The one thing that technology is not very good at is making subjective evaluations and decisions. And it's getting better with machine learning and artificial intelligence. And this is a weakness now. I'm going to say that probably in 5 or 10 years, it's no longer going to be a weakness. It'll probably be better than humans. That's just my expectation. That's the expectation of the world, is that artificial intelligence will exceed human intelligence probably within 10 years. And so I think that I have no reason to doubt that that won't happen. But where we are today in 2022, that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that understanding that technology is a tool, and here's my analogy. I think of it like artillery on the battlefield. Okay, it can be very powerful, but you have to have trained crews that know how to use it. You have to have the supporting ground forces. You have to have air power, right? Everything coordinate and strategic command and reconnaissance, all of those things together. Without them, you don't have an effective fighting force. Even if you have the best artillery in the world, you don't have an effective fighting force unless you have all those other bases covered. Technology, there is no compliance bot that can do everything, right? It's like a player on the field, like artillery, and there needs to be supporting cast around that technology. So the best way to think of technology is it's a tool. Probably one of the most powerful tools in the compliance toolbox, but it is just a tool. And how effective that tool will be wielded and the results obtained from using that tool are highly dependent upon all of those other factors, including, how well that tool is used and integrated, within its purpose. So I think that's something really important with regard to technology. And I think that one really common failing has nothing to do with technology, but it has to do with the users. I think that one thing that people often go into a technology implementation with unrealistic expectations that it's going to be this wonder tool and it's going to do everything. But there is the matter of the user. And if the users aren't adopting the tool, if the users aren't using the tool, and if the users aren't using the tool effectively, then it's not going to realize its potential. And so I would say that, in my opinion, with most technology vendors, the weakest link is not the technology itself, it's the users. And so what that means is looking in a mirror and understanding you and understanding your firm and understanding whether any type of technology implementation has the right conditions to be successful. And that means adoption, use, and getting up the learning curve to be able to use that tool effectively.
So important. Love what you're saying. And there is, if in an ideal world, and I think one of the things we try to do with our technology is to capture that end user's workflow in mind, right? So there is a regulatory change, there is a regulation that requires a specific process, call it digitization of the rollover recommendation process. And then how do you do that in a manner that serves the end investor, serves the financial advisor, and the compliance requirements from a supervisory perspective? These folks are not sort of isolated use cases. There is that connective tissue between them. Love that point foundationally, Craig. Thank you. Now, we've talked a little bit about adopting technology. We've talked a little bit about the emergence of the regulations that are ending up in your inbox. If Craig Watanabe, you've been in the industry since 1983. If you had a superpower, aside from having a compliance bot, what would you do with that, specifically in our industry, to transform it for the better?
That's a great question, and I have had the same answer for decades. So I've come to understand that if I had a magic wand and I could do one thing, it would be to have everyone have as a core value that good compliance is good business. If everyone had that core value, then I think we all have the correct aligned incentives, and we don't see compliance as an impediment or as the anti-business department, but it's something that needs to be done for the best interest of the client, of the advisor, the firm, and the industry. Good compliance is good business. It's surprising that not everyone truly believes that as a core value. But if they did, not just compliance personnel, but the people at the firm, if they all believe that good compliance is good business, then your ethical decision-making, makes a lot more sense and becomes a lot easier to manage.
You've heard it from the master himself. Good compliance is good business. And I love this conversation. And thank you very much for sharing your insights with our audience today, Craig.
Thank you, Paran. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Craig. And thank you for everyone tuning in to another WCL series. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like this video and subscribe to Investorcom's YouTube channel for more insights and episodes.